Hey everybody, Stinky here with a new video. This is the ultimate guide to Destruction Warlock PvP. Everything you need to know to get started in arenas, solo shuffles, and Battleground Blitz. Here's a video outline. First, we'll go over why play Destruction in the first place. It's super fun. You've seen it out there. You've seen the Chaos Bolts flying across the screen, deleting people. You know you want to cast them yourself, right? Second, we'll talk about gear, stats, tier pieces, crafted pieces, gems, and enchants. Third, talent points. We're going to go through every single talent point in the hero tree, the warlock tree, the destro tree, and we'll talk about the PvP talents as well. It'll be a long section, very detailed. Fourth, we're going to go over your spell rotations. There are 3 basic rotations you need to think about. First, your opener when you first get into combat. Second, your standard rotation when you're trying to maintain pressure throughout a match. And third, your burst rotation when you're trying to land a kill. Finally, I'm going to touch on a few notes about the playstyle of being a Destro Warlock. There are actually several different ways you can approach Destro. Really flexible, tailors to a few different types of playstyles depending on how aggressive you are and how much control you want to have over the match. Really fun spec, really rewarding when you land those kills. Before we start, a few points about me. I'm a longtime Warlock main, been playing since the Burning Crusade, got Gladiator a number of times throughout the years. Although I consider myself more of a demonology and affliction main, I played a ton of Destro in the War Within because it's very strong, it's a lot of fun, I'm usually at or near the rank 1 or top 10 level. But I play all 3 Warlock specs at a very high rating, rank 1 level. I play Shuffle, I play Arena, I play Blitz. You can catch me on stream. I'm streaming a lot these days, twitch.tv/smellystinky, and I'm making a lot of videos just like this one, guides for each spec, guides for other PvP modes like Battleground Blitz, which is super fun, highly recommend it. And you can catch those videos here at YouTube, youtube.com/@smellystinky. I love answering questions. Any question is a good one. Drop it in the comments below. Catch me on stream. I will answer your questions about Warlocks, PvP, life in general, whatever. I've also made all of my UI stuff, all my weak auras, all my add-on import codes available on my Discord, totally free. Just drop by my Twitch, type !Discord, and you'll get a link to my Discord. Everything's there. You can get set up. I just want to see the PvP scene grow because I think retail PvP is in a great spot. Don't listen to the naysayers. It's a lot of fun, especially if you like solo and casual modes. All right, let's dive into the guide. Destro. Why play it? First, the Destruction Warlock class fantasy is amazing. You can hurl green Chaos Bolts that just rip through your opponents. You cast Demon Fire spells and Fell Fire spells from the Flames of Zoroth and Ner'zhul, or you know, I'm not a lore expert, honestly, but if I were a lore expert, I'm pretty sure I'd find the class fantasy super awesome. For the more practical minds out there, Destro is really fun because it's flexible and very strong in a lot of situations. What it's really good at, constant damage pressure. So it's really good at a team fight. It's really good at extended, drawn out battles. It's also good at a setup playstyle where you get a lot of crowd control out at the same time as your damage combo. Really high kill pressure. And it's good at doing damage on the move if you want to kite around, if that's your playstyle, or if you're on a map that requires a lot of movement, or if you just like to be a damage turret and you want to plant yourself in the middle of the room, you can just do that, do a ton of damage, make your enemies fear you that way too. And it's flexible in terms of composition because you can slot a Destro Warlock into any 3v3 comp and it'll basically work just fine. It can pair up with a supportive class that does more crowd control, kind of helps you set up your one-shot kills, and it can also play a more supportive role if it's paired up with somebody who does a ton of damage themselves. But let's face it, the reason you're here is because you've seen a Destro Warlock basically one-shot somebody. Not literally one-shot, but you can take somebody from 60-70% of their health to 0 in a Chaos Bolt combo. It's really fun, very hard to react to, very hard to play against. Okay, let's talk gear. First thing, item level. Item level is always something that you're going to try to improve on until you get to the maximum item level for PvP, which currently is 684, but that scales up depending on the season that you're watching this in. Endgame PvP item level, which is called Conquest gear, it always scales up to the maximum item level available, even in Mythic rating in PvE. Item level is important because that gives you Intellect, which is your main stat, that gives you damage, and Stamina, which makes you healthier, makes you last longer in fights. Really important stats in PvP. In terms of your secondary stat priorities, generally speaking, you're going to want to have a lot of versatility and haste more than mastery and crit. Haste is really strong because it makes you cast faster, which makes it harder for other people to interrupt your cast, and you can get more casts out during the duration of a game. And it also makes your dots tick faster. When you're Destro Lock, you're either casting Wither or Immolate on your enemies, and as those do damage over time, they will generate shards for you, which is a really important resource as a Destro Lock, and they'll also randomly sometimes activate other abilities and talents, so you really want your dots to tick as fast as possible, which happens with Haste. Versatility is important because it makes you hit harder, so your Chaos Bolts are a little bit scarier, and it makes you take less damage because you are going to be trained a lot if you play a Warlock, so your healer's job will be a lot easier if you have a lot of versatility. So aim for around 30% haste, 30% versatility, if at all possible. Mastery is another great stat for Destro Locks because it scales well with your damage. You can easily get up to 70, 80%, even higher mastery. Your Chaos Bolts can hit basically almost twice as hard as with a haste and versatility build. However, it's a lot harder to play because it's harder to get your casts off, you generate fewer resources, so I recommend a haste versatility focus build, mastery as a tertiary stat. Critical Strike, on the other hand, is not a stat that scales well in PvP, it's nerfed in PvP, so don't chase after that. There are 3 types of gear that you need to collect for your final PvP set. The first is just gear you buy from the vendor. Super simple, you buy it from this guy here, he sells Conquest level gear. This is end game PvP gear, Conquest gear. Now when you're first starting out, you won't be able to afford all the Conquest gear, so you can start with crafted gear that you buy off the auction house, and you can buy honor gear that you buy from this guy here. He sells it for honor. Honor you collect from just doing any sort of PvP in the world, in quests, in battlegrounds, in arenas. You can also get bloody token gear from this vendor here. You get bloody tokens by doing quests. They're weekly quests from the quest giver in Dornagal, and that can hold you over until you can get fully geared in Conquest level gear. The second type of PvP gear you need are 2 crafted pieces, at least 2. You need 2 because you need what are called embellishments. You want 2 elemental focusing lenses. These will just add damage to your casts, totally passive procs. You don't have to think about it at all. I recommend getting at least 1 ring that's crafted because you can get a haste versatility stat on it, because you can only buy 1 other haste versatility ring from the vendor. You can stick embellishments on any crafted piece. Here I have it on my ring and my wrist. The third and final type of gear you need to get is your tier pieces. Now there's a little bit of optionality when it comes to Destro because the tier pieces add a little damage to your casts, but they're not really critical in the sense that they're fundamentally important or required for your class. I think it's worth running at least 2 tier pieces because the head and shoulders are pretty well itemized. They have haste and mastery, which are both pretty good stats. But if you want to run haste versatility on all 4 of your pieces, you can do that. You can skip the tier pieces entirely. Personally, I run with 4 tier pieces because, well, they're pretty strong and they work really well with affliction and demo that I play a lot, so it keeps things simple. I have the same gear set for all 3 specs. And just look at my bags, they're full of junk. Fishing gear, toys, engineering, gadgets. Gotta simplify. Another note on PvP gear, you need to run with the PvP trinkets. You cannot run with any other trinkets. No PvE stuff that you get in Mythic rating, even if it seems super awesome. There's a set bonus for running 2 PvP trinkets, and that gives you a lot of extra stamina and intellect, so you'll always run with these. You will basically always use a medallion. Medallions can be used every 2 minutes to get you out of crowd control. Really important to use it defensively to get out of dodge when you're under fire, or use it offensively to land the kill when you're being crowd controlled during your Chaos Bolt combo. The other PvP trinket, you have a choice between the badge and the insignia. The insignia is something that's a lot easier to use, it's passive, it procs a lot, gives you a lot of extra damage, and the badge is something if you're more of a setup oriented player and you want to make sure your Chaos Bolt combo does as much damage as possible, you can use that instead. Personally, I use the insignia, I don't have to think about it, does a lot of extra damage. Now for gems. Gems, there's one requirement. You need a cognitive bloodstone. This is a very fundamental part of playing a caster. The way it works is if you pretend to cast something and you stop casting and an enemy uses an interrupt on you, interrupts are anything from kicks to pummels to spell locks, counter spells, anything that would stop your casting. If you stop your casting first and they don't interrupt your cast, then what happens is you get a buff called precognition. Precog lasts for 4 seconds. You have total immunity to crowd control and other interrupts, so you can free cast. During that 4-second window, you can get 2 Chaos Bolts back to back, tons of damage. Beyond that, you can get whatever gems you want. If you want versatility and haste gems, I personally run with a lot of quick sapphires, but you can also get haste mastery, mastery versatility, whatever you feel like fits your playstyle the best. To get sockets for PvP gear, you buy it from the honor vendor. He sells them for a ton of honor and vicious bloodstones. It's a long grind. Beyond the cognitive bloodstone, they don't make a huge difference, so you can queue even with just one gem. Enchants. The head enchant is called a corruption. It comes from the Horrific Visions event in Dornigal. This is actually a bit of PvE that you'll need to do if you want to min-max your character. It's not super critical. It will add maybe 1 to 2% to your damage, but it does take a few hours to complete the event from scratch, so you can weigh whether you need that depending on how much you play and how much you care about this extra little enchant. If you do the event, get the Greater Void Ritual. This will just add a little bit to your secondary stats on occasion. You can also get a Twisted Appendage and a Gushing Wounds. Those add a little bit of damage to your rotation, but I do think that the Void Ritual is better. For your back, I recommend getting Chant of Leeching Fangs. This adds a little bit of leech stat, which heals you as you do damage. That's not super important. What is important is it gives you out of combat regeneration, which is really great in Battleground Blitz. When you're running from one fight to the next, you want to regen your health. For your chest, you get Crystalline Radiance. This just gives you intellect. For your wrist, you have a little bit of an option between speed and leech. I run with leech because I don't kite very much. Speed will help you kite, and it's also really good in Blitz. Your legs, you're going to get the Spell Thread that gives you intellect and stamina. On your boots, get Defender's March, that gives you stamina. On your rings, you can get whatever stat you want. I personally get Radiant Versatility because I think versatility helps me the most in my playstyle. Radiant Haste is another great option. And then for your weapon, I would get Authority of Radiant Power. This is just a damage proc and it gives you a little bit of an intellect boost every now and then. Hero Talents. There are 2 viable hero talents for Destro. You can play either one. They tend to support different types of playstyles. Hellcaller benefits those who really like to kite, do damage on the move, because a lot of your damage is loaded into instant cast. Wither will replace your Immolate and it's instant cast. It's very easy to apply your dot damage to a lot of targets, and there's a lot of damage loaded into Malevolence, which is your 1 minute cooldown, and it's also an instant cast, meaning that you can't get shut down. You can do a lot of pressure even while being attacked, even when you can't otherwise get your hard casts out. You still have really strong Chaos Bolt kill windows. You can get your combo Chaos Bolts, do a ton of single target pressure, and a lot of spread pressure. Hellcaller is definitely the more popular PvP spec for Destro, and it's really good in Blitz where you need to do damage when you're on the move quite often. Very, very strong spec. Probably the best overall Destro PvP spec. The main thing to note about Hellcaller is that most of the talent points in the tree add a lot of damage to your Wither, and they add to what's called Blackened Soul. When your Wither is on a target, it'll start to stack, and every now and then it'll collapse, do extra damage by adding this dot called Blackened Soul. You don't have to do a lot to play around it, it'll just proc every now and then, but when you do cast Malevolence on a minute cooldown, you get a haste buff and it makes you do a lot of damage through Wither and Blackened Soul. For your choice notes, I tend to go with Curse of the Satyr. I think it's a pretty strong curse, especially when paired with Amplify Curse, but Aura of Enfeeblement is a pretty good defensive cooldown too. I think especially useful in something like Blitz where you might hit a lot of targets with those curses. The second choice node, Bleak Heart Tactics, tends to add a little bit more damage to your rotation. I think it's a little bit better. And your third one, always take Zevran's Resilience. It's going to give you a little bit of healing when you use Dark Pact. Makes your minor defensive cooldown a lot stronger. However, I personally play Diabolist in almost every situation because it is super fun. Diabolist comes with some pros and cons. Cons, you need to hard cast your Immolate, which is a very important dot in your rotation, but it requires you to stand still and cast it, so it's a less mobile spec. Harder to do damage when you're under pressure as well. The upside of Diabolist though is that you do a little bit more burst damage, which makes your Chaos Bolt combos a lot more threatening. This is because you summon pets using Diabolic Ritual. They shoot lasers and fireballs and whatever at your targets while you're casting Chaos Bolt, so your kill window is very threatening, very strong, although it is harder to set up. For your Diabolist tree, the main thing to note is Diabolic Ritual. This basically will give you an extra big pet every now and then just from spending soul shards going through your damage rotation. The other talent points either add to your damage or create these 2 new procs. There's Ruination, which will replace your Chaos Bolt every now and then. It'll do less damage than a Chaos Bolt, which is kind of frustrating, but because it doesn't cost any soul shards, it is a pretty nice proc to get, and it summons pets that do some damage too. The other proc is Secrets of the Coven, which is a pretty great proc to get because it replaces your Shadow Bolt with Infernal Bolt. It does a lot of damage, And importantly, it gives you 3 soul shards, which will help you with your damage rotations. For your first choice node, I tend to go with Soul Etched Circle, which improves your demonic circle. It'll basically save you 1 soul burn every now and then, so it saves you a shard every now and then. The reason is I don't usually take Howl of Terror, where Anilan's Bellow would be useful, because with Destro, unlike with Demonology, you tend to use Mortal Coil instead of Howl of Terror because of Havoc, which I'll show you in the Destro tree later. For your second choice node, I tend to go with Cruelty of Kirkson. I think it does a little bit more damage than Infernal Machine. Pretty similar though. For your third one, I go with Infernal Vitality. This heals you when you use Unending Resolve, which is really important because that's when you need healing the most. Now for the Warlock Talent tree, which is going to be the same for both Diabolist and Hellcaller, although you'll change a few points around here and there based on your playstyle. First up is Fel Domination. This is really important to get out another pet if your first pet dies, so it's something you will take very often because you will want to run with a pet, usually as a Destro lock. Pets add a lot of utility. They give you more damage, they give you Soul Link, I'll show you that below, that makes you tankier, and they also have Devour Magic, which is an offensive dispel, really powerful tool in PvP, and they cast Spell Lock for you, which is your interrupt. They can do this from around a corner, they can do this from further range, really great utility when you do it from the pet. Soul Leech, Demon Skin, and Fel Armor, all you really need to know about these talent points is that they make you tankier and you need them to access stuff below. Burning Rush and Fiendish Stride are great when you play Battleground Blitz. You need them to get around a larger map. You won't usually take this in Arena or Solo Shuffle because they drain a lot of your health very quickly, but they're a must-have on Blitz. Spell Pact is something I skip. It's something that you'll take only if you're facing a team that you know is going to kill your pet repeatedly, but usually you can't afford this talent point. Curses of Enfeeblement are great. You'll take this all the time. You're going to cast Exhaustion on your targets that you want to kite or that you want to slow down if in a Blitz setting. And you'll use Tongues really frequently on healers and casters, make them a lot slower at casting. Demonic Circle Teleport is a fundamental part of how you play a lock. It's your only mobility spell on a short cooldown, so you will use this all the time in the Blitz, Arena, Shuffle, every setting. For this choice node, you usually will take Mortal Coil because it works really well with the Mayhem and Havoc talent on the Destro tree. Howl of Terror is pretty good in a lot of situations where you're surrounded by melee or surrounded by pets, but usually you'll take Mortal Coil. Amplify Curse is great. You're going to use this a lot whenever you know that you're facing a team that doesn't have curse removal. You will use Amplify Curse with Curse of Weakness on hunters and melee. It'll slow down their damage a lot. You'll use Amp Curse of Tongues to slow down healers and casters, and Amplify plus Exhaustion makes it really easy to kite somebody. These other 4 talent points on this row, they basically make you tankier or make you do more damage. Not much to think about there, you will take them every time. The central point here, Abyss Walker, is really strong because you pair it with your Demonic Circle and you're casting Teleport all the time. It's giving you a really strong damage reduction buff. It's 8%. It says 4% here, but it's actually 8% in arenas and battlegrounds. Really strong damage reduction. Banish is optional. You can pick this up against other warlocks, but it's not something that you really need to take very often. Teachings of the Satyr, this gives you a lot of value out of your Amplify Curse. If you're facing somebody that doesn't have a lot of curse removal, it is worth taking sometimes. You should always skip Accrued Vitality. You are never going to cast Drain Life, it's not very good for Destro. For the next choice node, you're never going to take Horrify, that's a PvE thing. You want things to run away from you when you fear them. And Nightmare is useful in certain situations. I don't take it very often as Destro, but it is going to help your fears stick a little longer. Demonic Gateway is the second piece of the puzzle for your mobility. You're going to use it to get away from really bad situations. It's on a longer cooldown than Teleport, so it's a really important spell to use wisely. But you will use it in every game that you play. Lifeblood is just a node that you can't afford. It adds a little bit of healing, not a big deal though. Dark Pact is a defensive cooldown you're going to use all the time. You need this node. You're going to use this early and often throughout any match. Unending Resolve is your defensive cooldown of last resort. You use this when your healer is crowd controlled and you have no other cooldowns left. For the choice node, you usually will take Strength of Will because you only get to cast Unending Resolve once in a match, and so you want it to be as strong as possible. However, I do take Dark Accord sometimes when I'm playing Blitz, and I know I'm going to be in a lot of little fights, a lot of skirmishes throughout the match, but even then I usually still take Strength of Will. Shadow Fury is a really really powerful cooldown, especially when paired with your Infernal Stun. It's powerful AoE crowd control. You use this almost on cooldown. For this choice node, you usually go with Frequent Donor because you want to use Dark Pact as often as possible. I take Ichor of Devils only when I'm playing Blitz and I know I'm not going to be in a lot of fights and I'd rather preserve health, such as when I'm sitting on a base. Socrator's Guile is a very strong talent point, especially for Hellcaller, because a lot of your damage is loaded into Immolate. For Diabolist, it's a little less necessary, and I actually often skip it in order to save points. Starter technique is not really good in the sense that it adds damage, because Incinerate itself does almost no damage in your rotation, but it is a really efficient way to access the talent points below, so I take it pretty often. Dark Fury and Shadow Flame are not that bad in terms of utility, but it's really hard to afford the extra talent points here, so I rarely take it. Swift Artifice and Resolute Barrier are pretty good in PvE. Not so good in PvP. I mean, they're good, but they're just not worth the talent points here. Demonic Tactics is something you take simply because of its location on the tree. It just gives you a little bit of damage. Teachings of the Black Harvest pairs really well with the Fell Hunter pet because your offensive Dispel, Devour Magic, it's really strong in PvP and you want to use it as often as possible. Fell Synergy and Soul Link just make you a little bit tankier. Demonic Resilience gives you a lot of extra tankiness. It also makes your pet a lot harder to kill. I often try to take this node if I can. Even just a single point in this node makes your pet a lot harder to kill. Pact of Gluttony is a must-have. You're going to be using your health stone all the time in combat, every minute. Really great defensive cooldown. Soul Conduit is nice if you proc it during your burst rotation because soul shards are really meaningful in that rotation, but it's pretty hard to afford talent points in this tree, so I usually skip it. Finally, Soul Burn. This is the most important talent in your tree. You're going to use this all the time paired with all sorts of spells. You pair it with Health Funnel to heal up your pet super fast. You pair it with all of your health stones so they heal a lot of your health. If you're a Hellcaller, you always want to pair Soul Burn and Teleport so that you get the extra speed boost and immunity to slows while you teleport. That's something you get baseline as a Diabolist, so you don't need to pair it together. And you use Soul Burn when you're laying your Demonic Gateway to get it out really quickly and then you can't get interrupted. The only thing you won't really use it with is Drain Life, and that's simply because you won't cast Drain Life basically ever as a Destro lock. Turning now to the Destro tree. Conflagrate is one of your main instant cast spells that you're going to be casting basically all the time. This is a really good filler spell because it helps you generate shards and it's instant cast so you can cast it while on the move and kiting around. And it's also an important part of your burst combo because of Backdraft. Backdraft will make your Chaos Bolts cast faster, so you'll always try to lead into your burst window with a couple of Conflagrates first. For the choice node in Rain of Fire, you want to take the one that targets the ground on the left because you're never really using Rain of Fire in combat to target enemies. You're using it on the ground in order to pop a stealther out or to spend shards while out of combat and waiting for your next fight. For example, if you're sitting on a base in Blitz. That'll help you get to your next burst window much quicker, so it makes it more powerful in your next combat. For the next talent point, I usually take Roaring Blaze. Roaring Blaze? That's really hard to say. It'll just passively add to your damage, and it's pretty nice when paired with Soul Fire. Improved Conflag is also pretty good. You can use that with a more setup-oriented playstyle, since it'll make it easier to lead into your burst window with a couple of Conflags. Backlash is pretty great just for the extra damage alone, but it also gives you instant cast Incinerates, which you'll proc quite often when you're being attacked by melee. Incinerate doesn't do a lot of damage, but it does help you generate shards. The next choice node, there are two options here depending on your playstyle. The one on the right is called Havoc. Cast it on a target and it'll duplicate spells onto that target, meaning if you cast Havoc on one target and you start casting Soul Fires and Chaos Bolts at another, it's going to duplicate them and you're going to be casting twice as many spells. You're doing almost twice as much damage during that window. If you take Mayhem on the left, it turns into a passive node and it'll randomly proc Havoc on targets near you. It can be a little hit or miss since it might land on a pet or something that you don't really care about duplicating your spells on, but it will proc very frequently. So it's a lot of trade-offs here, a lot of pros and cons. If you're a more setup-oriented person and you want to try and land a kill, especially if you're coordinating on comms with your teammates, Havoc is probably the better choice. However, I usually take Mayhem because it's a little stronger in solo shuffle because it has a very high uptime, and when you start facing better and better healers and better players, they will dispel Havoc so quickly that you'll get very little use out of the manually applied Havoc. If you're new to Warlock, new to Destro, Mayhem is probably the better choice since it's simply one less keybind you have to worry about. Pyrogenics is just a PvE thing, you never take this. Cataclysm is something that's useful in PvP, especially in Blitz when there's a clumped team fight and you can get Immolate on a lot of targets. Really strong spell if you can manage to get this off. Indiscriminate Flames, you can see here, this simply loads even more utility into your Conflag leading into your burst window since it'll improve the damage of your Chaos Bolts and Soul Fires. Rolling Havoc is actually pretty good, especially especially when paired with Mayhem, since you have a lot of uptime on Havoc, and it'll increase your damage overall, probably by a 1 or 2% in general, but I usually have to skip it because there's so many good options in the destro tree. Scalding Flames is a must-have whether you're Diabolist or Hellcaller. You get a lot of damage out of your immolates. Shadowburn is the second of your 2 instant cast spells along with Conflag. You're using it a lot, very often, for 2 major reasons. First, it's easy to get out because it's instant cast, it's reliable damage, especially because it's a Shadow Flame spell, because if you're kicked in fire or in shadow, you can still cast Shadow Burns. And the second reason is because it helps spend shards. Spending shards is really important to get to your biggest burst window, which I'll go over in a minute. Explosive Potential is probably the node I would take next if I had just one more talent point to throw into this tree. I see a lot of people taking it, and I think it's a really good option because Conflag has a lot of utility in your build. The next choice node is dependent on your playstyle. If you don't like managing a pet, or you find it difficult, or you think your Fell Hunter looks ugly and you can't figure out where its eyeballs are, then you can sacrifice it and you get most of the utility out of it. You lose Devour Magic and you lose a little tankiness, but you don't have to worry about pet management and pet pathing. Summoner's Embrace requires a little more work to manage your pet, but it is better. You get more damage, you get tankier, it's generally better when the spell lock is cast by your pet and not by you, and you also get your offensive dispel through Devour Magic. But even so, in a really big teamfight situation like in Battleground Blitz, I'll often sacrifice my pet just because the pet will die so easily. Ashen Remains, you want to take this to beef up your Chaos Bolts during your burst window. The next is a choice node. You'll never take Demon Fire Infusion because that basically does no damage at all. Channel Demon Fire, however, is a very good damaging spell, and I find that it plays really well, especially with Wither. So when I go Hellcaller, I tend to go with the Channel Demon Fire route, which you'll take these 3 nodes here because all 3 will improve your Channel Demon Fire spell, which is a great thing to just throw into your rotation. It's fire, so if you get kicked, you can actually still cast other things, and it extends the duration of all of your withers. When I'm playing Diabolist, I tend to skip Channel Demon Fire and I go for Soulfire down here. I'll show you in a second. Soulfire tends to be a little bit better when paired with Diabolist. I do find it very hard to afford both Channel Demon Fire and Soulfire, so you kind of have to pick between the 2. Blistering Atrophy and Conflagration of Chaos, these are simply good because they increase your Shadowburn damage. Emberstormer is great, just adds to your damage. Summon Infernal is the core part of your biggest burst window. It's a 2-minute cooldown. When you cast this guy, he's going to beef up your damage a ton. You'll see from the nodes below. Important thing with Infernal is that you want to try and cast this on a lot of enemies because it'll stun everybody in the area it lands in, and it also generates a lot of shards, and it does this AoE immolate aura. It does a lot of damage. Fire and Brimstone, Burn to Ashes, Diabolic Embers, these are pretty useless. They're just bait. Don't take them. Incinerate is not something you want to cast very often. Flashpoint is great. You're going to have a lot of uptime on this, ton of extra haste from this node alone. Fiendish Cruelty, I just don't think this is worth the talent point. Eradication, straightforward, increase to your damage, really good. The next choice node, in PvP, you're always going to take Crashing Chaos. This is so good. This increases your next Chaos Bolt damage by a lot after Infernal, and the buff lasts for a long time, so you have a very long window after you cast Infernal to get out some more Chaos Bolts that do a ton of damage. The next choice node, I usually take Reverse Entropy. It's very strong. You get a lot of haste out of it, a lot of uptime out of it. However, Internal Combustion is pretty fun, and it'll add about 500k to 1 million extra damage to each of your Chaos Bolts. So it makes your burst window a lot more threatening. However, it's a lot harder to get to your burst windows because you don't have that extra haste. Devastation and Ruin, all you need to know is they give you more damage. Ritual of Ruin, this is central to your burst window. You need to spend 15 shards through Shadow Burns, Chaos Bolts, even Rain of Fire. And when you spend 15, you get Ritual of Ruin, which makes your next Chaos Bolt super fast cast, free of shards. This is what lets you chain together 3 or 4 Chaos Bolts in a row, really, really strong. Master Ritualist and Avatar of Destruction, these just pair with your Ritual of Ruin to make it proc more frequently and to make it stronger with an extra Overfiend who casts a Chaos Bolt of his own. Soulfire with Decimation is a really strong combo. You get this proc every now and then that'll let you cast Soulfire really quickly. It applies Immolate for you, and it does a lot of damage, and it gives you a ton of shards. A lot of utility out of it. I think it's really good for Diabolist, although when I play Hellcaller, I tend to skip it and take Channel Demon Fire instead. Improved Chaos Bolt, this increases your Chaos Bolt damage. You always want this. Same with Chaos Incarnate. Even if you're not stacking Mastery, this is still a very strong node in terms of adding to your Chaos Bolt damage. Power Overwhelming. This is a decent damage node. It's pretty nice. However, if you go with a Soulfire build, like you go with Diabolist, it's pretty hard to afford, but it's not a bad node. I think some people take it. Totally legit. Dimension Ripper, this is pretty decent. I actually usually take this. It adds to your damage. It has a chance to open a portal that'll cast a Chaos Bolt that adds basically 1,000,000 to your burst window. Pretty nice sometimes. Dimensional Rift is also very good. If you're having trouble getting casts out and you need more instant casts, this is a very good option. If you cast 3 of these in a row, it actually adds a ton to your damage and your soul shard generation, a very good lead into your burst window. But even so, I would skip Unstable Rifts. It's not very strong from what I've seen. But to recap, there's quite a lot of optionality here, depending on your playstyle. If you need more instant casts, you can go with Dimensional Rift. If you like Diabolist, I think Soulfire is a little stronger. If you like Hellcaller, you can go with Channel Demonifier. You can actually skip both of them if you want to just throw more nodes into Power Overwhelming and Rolling Havoc, just try and get bigger Chaos Bolts. There's a lot of different ways to play this, setup oriented, just more general damage. I've included a few build links in the video description below. However, if you want to see more builds and more up-to-date builds, then you can find those on my Discord. You can join my Discord by going to my Twitch channel and typing !Discord. Totally free to join, and I'll keep the builds in the Discord up to date based on patch changes, new seasons, new expansions. Alright, PvP talents. Fell Fissure is great. This is going to add a Mortal Strike effect and slowing effect to your Chaos Bolts. You don't necessarily need this if you're paired up with somebody who already provides this, like a warrior or a rogue, but I find being self-sufficient with your own Mortal Strike effect makes your Chaos Bolt combo a lot stronger. Bane of Havoc, this is kind of a clunky spell. This used to be really strong. I think it's a little buggy in how it applies to the ground, and I believe it doesn't work with Mayhem at all these days, so I just don't even take this. Nether Ward provides a lot of utility against other casters, especially if they're very bursty like an Elemental Shaman or another Destro Lock. Gateway Mastery, this has a lot of utility in certain Blitz maps, especially Temple of Kotmogu, to help you get really far across the map and use your gateway very frequently. In Shuffle, this is more of a liability. I would never take this because if you take a long gate and the rest of your team isn't on the same page, you're just going to be on your own and you're just going to die all alone. In a coordinated threes environment, you can take the gateway together and you can kite super far across the map. Shadow Rift, really fun spell in Blitz. You can use it on Eye of the Storm, Battle for Gilneas. You can make crazy plays sending people into the water or to force cap a flag. Really fun spell, only in Blitz though. Bonds of Fel simply will never fit into your build because other PvP talents are simply better. Bloodstones, you should never take this, it's really bad. You need the healing from your demonic health stones. You can't give that up for haste. Impish Instincts, this is a must-have. You need this if you're facing any physical damage. Hunters, melee, you can teleport more frequently to help you kite, and it'll keep your Abyss Walker buff up a lot more too. Finally, Soul Rip, this is a great defensive spell, really good against melee, really good against casters. I use this quite often as a Destro Lock. Alright, we're finally ready to talk rotations. So there are 3 types of rotations you need to be thinking about. The first is your opener, what you first cast when you enter the arena, when you enter combat in a blitz. The second is your standard rotation that you're using to fill the gaps between your opener and your burst rotation. It's simply your way of maintaining pressure while setting up for your big burst window. And third is your burst window, how you actually take out your opponents. It's going to be based on your Chaos Bolts, your shards, and your Ritual of Ruin. So I'm going to show you the rotation with the Diabolist build, Diabolist and Soulfire. However, I'll show you the Hellcaller rotation afterward. Conceptually, they remain very similar in terms of their playstyle. Alright, first thing you do, Demonic Circle Teleport, Gateway. You need to lay these first because this is the center of your action. If you get in trouble, the first thing you do is you port back. If you get in a lot of trouble, you take the Gateway to get away. Gateway and Getaway. Wow, those are anagrams. My mind is blown. Anyway, anytime you relocate, if you're chasing them down or if you're kiting super far away, you should relay a new circle, a new gateway, so that you can have a new center of action. All right, first thing you do, you get your Immolates up on your targets. If you're Hellcaller, this would simply be a Wither instant cast. If you're Diabolist, you have to hard cast it. You want this to have 100% uptime on your kill target for sure, and you want it rolling on as many other targets as possible because you generate a lot of shards, there's a lot of damage pressure, and as Hellcaller it's a great builder spell because it's instant cast, you can always be casting it, and as Diabolist it's a fire spell. If you get kicked while casting Immolate, that's actually great because that means you're free to cast Fear, Shadow Burn, Chaos Bolt. Also as part of your opener, especially if you're running Amplify Curse, you want to use curses. Curse of Exhaustion on melee, Curse of Weakness on hunters, Curse of Weakness on melee as well if you simply don't think you can kite them, Curse of Tongues on healers and casters. The curses will buy you a lot of extra time to get you to your burst window. And that's basically your opener. You want to get your immolates up, you want to get your curses out, and then you shift your mindset over to the standard rotation. Your standard rotation is not really a rotation per se. You can't just queue up spells and not really think about what's happening. You simply have to adapt to what's happening around you. Interrupts, CC, dispels especially. This is your basic priority system. First, maintain uptime on your immolates and curses, especially on priority kill targets. Second, efficiently use your cooldowns. This is really focused on Conflag and Shadowburn. You can have up to 2 charges each. When they have max charges, 2 charges, they are not going to be recharging. However, if they have only 1 or 0 charges left, they will continually be recharging a new charge. This means that you want to efficiently use Conflag and Shadowburn so that you are constantly recharging those cooldowns. However, you don't want to overuse them because Conflag, you need them for your burst window, and if you overuse Shadowburn, you're not going to have shards saved up for your burst window either. So it's kind of a balance. You want to basically be using Conflag and Shadowburn so they're constantly recharging without overusing them. Next on your priority system is simply to generate shards and spend shards until you get to your Ritual of Ruin. So you want to get to at least 11 shards before you lead into your burst window. You can track your shards spent with a weak aura. I use Luxthos here. You can see the number here. Really helpful in terms of tracking how many shards I've spent and how close I am to Ritual of Ruin. Otherwise, in terms of your filler spells during your standard rotation, if you've got your curses and your dots up and you're using Conflag and Shadowburn efficiently, you want to weave in Fears and occasional Incinerates, especially if they're proccing an Infernal Bolt. And if you're overcapping on shards, you can throw in a couple of Chaos Bolts, especially if you can get a Precognition proc. Finally, your burst window. Now there are 2 burst windows, one with Infernal and one without. Basically, you have a ton of kill pressure with your Infernal every 2 minutes, and outside of that, every time you have Ritual of Ruin proc, you can still set up a kill with multiple Chaos Bolts, so you still want to go for it. However, it's a lot easier to get those kills with Infernal. It's very simple. Save up 3 or 4 shards at least, have your Ritual of Ruin ready or near ready, so 11 plus shards spent. Make sure your dots are up, especially Immolate on your kill target, and then you want to burst. You simply cast a bunch of Chaos Bolts. Now before you do this, you really want to get a precog proc if possible. If you're not good at getting that, that's okay. You lead in with your double coil. That means mortal coil on your target and whoever the mayhem is on, or if you have havoc on whoever might interrupt you or heal the target. Throw in an infernal stun right before that as well, and your chaos bolts will hit super hard. With shards saved up and a Ritual of Ruin proc, you can do 10 million damage in 3 chaos bolts back to back, super fast casts along with backdraft. It's a ton of damage, really hard to heal, especially if you do this during a precog window or a double coil or infernal stun. If you're managing your shards well, you can do this combo every minute or so, and you pair it with a infernal every 2 minutes. You basically are always threatening to kill somebody every time you have Ritual of Ruin up. Now here I'm playing Diabolist, and you'll see that I'm occasionally casting Ruination. This is the proc that changes my Chaos Bolt into Ruination. Sometimes it's a little frustrating because Ruination does less damage than a Chaos Bolt, so it's kind of crazy that you're building up to this Ruination proc and then it does less than what it replaces. However, it doesn't cost any shards, so you can throw this into your kill combo. It actually is going to add to your kill pressure overall. Additionally, as Diabolist, whenever you get Ritual of Ruin, you're also doing a lot of damage because you're summoning Overfiends, they're casting their own Chaos Bolts, you're summoning other pets. Basically, a lot of damage is rolling at the same time you're landing a couple of Chaos Bolts on your target. Finally, getting a Decimation proc during your kill window is also an amazing proc to get because you can throw a Soulfire in there, get more shards, throw out more Chaos Bolts. Soulfire does a ton of damage and it's a fire spell, so that if it gets kicked, you can still cast Chaos Bolts. Now, I'm going to switch over to Hellcaller so you can see what the rotation looks like with Hellcaller. I'm just going to briefly note it's basically the same thing. The only difference is that your Wither replaces Immolate, so when you're opening up in your standard rotation maintaining your dots, it's a lot easier because you can just instant cast Wither on all your targets. You maintain your Withers with instant casts. I also tend to play Channel Demon Fire, so you can see that it's going to refresh the duration of Withers on my targets. And the only other difference is that you're going to be on a very set 1 minute cooldown burst window with your Malevolence. Malevolence will add a lot of damage by adding more Blackened Soul damage to anybody that has Wither on them, and you get a haste proc, so it makes it a little easier to get your Chaos Bolts out. So you basically lead into your burst window the same as with Diabolist, and then you cast your Malevolence, then you do your Chaos Bolt combos. Same thing, you want to pair it with Ritual of Ruin if possible, and every 2 minutes you're going to pair it with both Ritual of Ruin and your Infernal. And that's it, those are your rotations: opener, basic rotation, and your burst window. In terms of playstyle, I will note that Hellcaller and Diabolist play pretty differently at the end of the day. So with Hellcaller, it's actually going to play a little bit more like Soul Harvester Affliction. You're trying to do a lot of rot damage, keep Wither up, trying to apply a lot of pressure throughout the game, pop the damage meters, and then your burst window. So with Affliction, it's all centered on your Soul Rot every minute and your Dark Glare plus Soul Rot combo every 2 minutes. With Destro, it's centered around your Malevolence plus Ritual of Ruin every minute, and your Malevolence, Ritual of Ruin, and Infernal every 2 minutes. But you have a lot of instant casts, you have a lot of ability to kite around, it's harder to shut down your damage. It's a lot of fun. Personally, I prefer Diabolist, which plays a little bit differently and a little bit more like a traditional Destro lock that you might remember if you ever played Destro in past expansions. It feels very bursty because when you get your Ritual of Ruin proc all lined up, it not only does a lot of damage, it feels like it does a lot of damage. It feels like you hit harder because you're summoning all these big pets that make a ton of noise as they pop out of the nether. Super fun, but you'll find it a little harder to maintain pressure throughout the game because Immolate is a hard cast, you're going to get kited, it's a little harder to find time to kite yourself, but your burst window is a little bit scarier because you can sometimes line it up with Touch of Rancora over here. You can do a lot of damage with your Chaos Bolt combo. In terms of general playstyle, it does align more with Affliction in the sense that you will kite a little bit more, you're going to line aside a little bit more compared to if you're playing Demonology when you want to be in their faces and doing a lot of pressure just through crowd control and eating up a lot of their attention. Destro, you will get chased a lot and you'll kite them behind line of sight and you'll just blow people up behind a pillar. And that's the guide. I stream Destro all the time, both Blitz, Arena, Shuffle, as well as Affliction and Demonology. Catch me at twitch.tv/smellystinky. I'm also uploading replays and guides and other videos on YouTube, youtube.com/@smellystinky, including this replay here. This is a 2600 solo shuffle lobby showcasing what's possible with Diabolist Destro at a high rating, along with a lot of commentary about what I'm thinking and through and how I'm strategizing in the game itself. Hope you enjoyed the guide. Hope you found it helpful. If you have any questions whatsoever, find me on stream. Drop your question in the comments below. I will answer everything I can. Hope to see you soon in the arenas, shuffles, blitzes, and on stream. All right, peace.